Thanks everyone for having us. I'm excited to moderate the next panel on cyber insurance. It's one of the first things I've written on the beat. Since I started on this beat, cyber insurance has grown quite a bit, but according to the latest statutory data at least, growth has slowed from 37% penetration in 2017 to 8% in 2018. So both of you, I was hoping you could answer why that might be and why the industry is still so concentrated among a few players.
Sure. The industry, there's a long way to go. I think there's been pricing compression that we've seen, which has certainly dampened growth, but penetration rates of cyber insurance are still remarkably low. We participate in the SMB segment, and I'd estimate that under 30% of businesses purchase insurance today. With that said, our growth is significantly higher than the market, so I'm not sure if that means we're taking share or the data is just wrong, but all the same, it's probably an $8 or $10 billion premium industry globally. What's more remarkable about it is the relative size of the cybersecurity industry relative to the cyber insurance industry. Cybersecurity is a $120 billion industry, whereas cyber insurance only $4, I think, in the United States. I believe that these should be inverted. Absolutely. I mean, there's over $1.5 trillion of losses each year attributed to cybercrime alone, most of which is not insured today.
Yeah, so if I just pick up on the last thing you said, Josh, just to kind of put things in framework for a minute, the amount of the amount of economic loss from cyber activity in the last few years has been substantially more, like by like an order of magnitude of 2 or 3, than property cat activity around the world, and there's been a lot of that the last couple of years. And the amount of premium paid for that exposure is 2 or 3 times the amount of cyber premium. So things are, to your point, things are really inverted right now. And what's even crazier is prices are coming down and risk is going up. And so, and now let me explain why that is. So you've got a lot of capacity available today. There's probably twice as much capacity available today as there was a few years ago. It's not all being deployed because everyone in our industry said, oh, cyber's the next new risk, man, we all got to be in. But no one really knows what it means to be in. And at the same time, you have business owners that haven't decided that they should buy cyber insurance or buy as much as perhaps they should. So there's this real gap between what's available and this willingness to pay or demand. And so where prices ought to be 5 or 10 times what they are, they're actually going down right now just because of macroeconomic trends. And everybody has this thought of, well, it's the other company that's going to get hit or the other person that's going to get hit. We'll be okay this year.
Well, I'm glad you touched on pricing because that's one of the biggest problems we're seeing. I remember hearing a while back that people thought cyber was the new asbestos, for example. Do you think that the industry, given kind of the dynamics that we're seeing now, do you think a lot of the industry is bracing for some serious losses already?
Well, I don't know about bracing. How about paying? I mean, there have been some pretty big losses in the last few years. Target is probably the most talked about data breach from a few years ago, and I think that there will be more coming, and it's just figuring out how and when. But that's just there's so much energy being put into criminal cyber activity today, and we're not talking about just amateur hackers anymore. We're talking about people that work for states during the day, and I mean states as in the nation state sense, not states of the United States. And then at night they take their same craft and they go apply it and focus it on whomever they can get to fall into the trap.
So Josh, this is a good point for you to weigh in on. Given your background at Cloudflare, what kind of sophistication are you seeing among cyber attacks now? What kind of issues are your clients dealing with that you're helping to help them prepare for?
Yeah, so I probably saw more firsthand cybercrime during my time at CIA, but Cloudflare was somewhat remarkable. It really helped me realize that cybersecurity technology companies weren't the answer, right? Even though Cloudflare was, we built a $4 billion company in 4 years. We were very good at DDoS mitigation. The number of threats that companies faced was enormous, and most of which we were not equipped to handle whatsoever. And there was no one for them to call, right? Like there was no vendor that you could go to and solve this problem. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, cybersecurity isn't a technology problem. We believe that it is a risk management problem, and it's no surprise that I think insurance is a fairly critical component of that.
Just to stay on that
Yeah.
for a second, we've spent a lot of time not only thinking about, are the businesses that we insure doing things the right way, and how can we help them, and do we have the right product for them, which is a whole nother discussion. But we're also trying to make sure that we've protected ourselves. And it's amazing, how much we can do with just better hygiene of how we manage our own companies or the businesses that we're insuring. And that's where a lot of the attacks are coming from. It's just kind of good corporate hygiene.
Right.
It's funny you mentioned, you said you used to work at the CAA. Mark, I know you mentioned you have CAA friends as well. One of the ideas that drove me into this was I interviewed an FBI agent that was entering the insurance world. This makes me wonder, do insurance companies have the right talent and expertise to really address this market with rigor?
Yeah, look, I think when you think about the future of insurance, cyber insurance particularly, there's a tremendous opportunity. And I think a lot of the questions you've asked around growth and whatnot, customers aren't getting what they need from the insurance world, right? They're not just looking for a policy. And cyber insurance is unique from almost every other line of insurance, particularly when it comes to a claim scenario. It's not a question of phoning your insurance company, taking some photos and hoping to get a check quickly. More often than not, the fire is still burning. It's one of the most unique lines of insurance, and there's a huge opportunity to innovate. And in our part, we are probably the only cyber insurance company in the market that has actually notified our customers that they've been breached, which allowed us to mitigate the damage that they experienced versus letting it continue for an indeterminate amount of time. We're probably the only cyber insurance company that can claim that in 2018, we directly helped our clients recover 63% of the funds that they had stolen through social engineering scams. So we interdicted directly with banks to help them recover that. We have instant response personnel on our team, and so we're very much filling a need for literally a 911 of cyber that doesn't exist.
That recovery process, how difficult is it?
It's, to be honest, if you know the right people, it's not terribly difficult. The challenge is that particularly if you're a small business owner and you're the victim of cybercrime, you feel helpless. Most business owners don't worry about the land, sea, and air around them. They have the military, the law enforcement, et cetera. But when it comes to this fourth domain, cyber, the government's all but said you're on your own. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for the insurance industry to take a more direct approach to actively managing risk, right? And when we see, take price, people worrying about pricing. Pricing to me is an output, right? The inputs are great underwriting, the ability to actively manage risk. And when it comes to the insurance industry's capability to do that today, it's a bit like eating soup with a fork, right?
Yeah, but I think some of that comes. You're absolutely right, but I think a lot of that comes with collaboration. You were talking about
Right.
how much money has gone into the cyber industry now, or cybersecurity industry,
Right.
and I think it's really important that we as an industry are very collaborative. We, the insurance industry, is collaborating with the cybersecurity industry because there are things to do to mitigate breaches from happening.
Right.
But as you just pointed out, there's a whole lot of companies that have been breached and they don't even know it. And then once they do, you've got to figure out how to stop it. So remediation is as important as trying to keep something from happening. And then you got to get the business that you've insured or the individual you've insured up and going again. And it takes a long time. To repair someone's identity takes a long time. If somebody's business is intentionally or unintentionally shut down, sometimes it takes a while to get it going again, depending upon how good their backups are.
I want to ask the question in reverse a little.
Sure.
How you address the insurance industry, but Mark, what did you have to put in place in terms of infrastructure to make this work for your company? Obviously, both of you have a partnership, speaking of collaboration, but are there resources you didn't have before that you needed to onboard to make this possible for you?
Well, if you look at the people in our company today versus 5 years ago, it's materially different. And it's not just for cyber, but it's for technology, in general. Our employee base is much more focused on all forms of technology today, and we've brought in a lot more people to talk about cyber in particular. Look, we've brought in a lot more people that understand the threat. We have a whole cyber underwriting team, and we've also got these partnerships that I was talking about, both firms that help prevent breaches from happening and remediate them once they do. And so it's creating this whole ecosystem so that we understand the businesses of the future and how we can help make them more secure.
So this was a conversation we had earlier today with Mike McGavick, for example, whether he felt that the insurance industry generally understood emerging threats, the technology industry in general. What's your take on this? Do you feel that your industry has a grasp?
Well, this is a trick question because I didn't hear what Mike had to say this morning. But listen, I think one of the speakers earlier said that we're a classic industry, which meant old. And yeah, it's true. I mean, our company's been around for 71 years. I'm not sure that the industry is evolving at the rate that it needs to. And the thing that so I'll just use our company as an example. The thing that I keep pounding into all of our colleagues is it's all about technology, technology, technology. And, Guy was on the stage earlier talking about how many underwriters he had for his company, and I think he said 1 to teach the algorithm. And, that's kind of where our industry is headed, and that's certainly where our company's headed.
So that's an interesting time to talk about workforce. I was wondering what yours looks like, Josh. What kinds of people are you hiring?
That's one more underwriter than we have. So, I think it says it all. Like, the future of insurance for us are software engineers. 60% of our team have a computer science background, right, or mathematical background. And to give a lot of credit, we're an MGA. Argo does a bunch of wonderful things. We also partner with Swiss Re, and so they handle a lot of the nitty-gritty of running a carrier, which lets us focus on, underwriting claims, actively working with our customers to mitigate their risk. But the makeup of our company looks like a technology company, absolutely.
Well, that's a good way to talk about how you add value to the MGA also. What part of the role do you play here, and how have you become a partner for Coalition?
Well, so, look, all these partnerships all take on different shapes and forms, but for our relationship, we provide some of that plumbing in the back end that Josh was referring to, us and Swiss Re as well. And we also provide the underwriting capacity, so it sits on our balance sheet. And so we've got the capital to do that.
So another thing about your background that we haven't talked about is you also worked in finance for a while. You worked at Goldman Sachs. You worked at a private equity firm. How has that lent itself to what you're doing now?
Yeah, people ask about the success of Coalition, and of course I tell them it happened overnight after thinking about it for 25 years, or 25-year career. But in some respects, Coalition is the culmination of everything I've done. It is the blending of cybersecurity with a financial service, insurance. At Goldman and other places, I was trading risk, maybe in a slightly different way. This just happens to be a different asset class, and I have to say it's fun. I did not grow up thinking I would ever become an insurance salesman, and here I am, Mom. Thank you.
Well, another element of that you had mentioned before we got up here also is that you're still working with all types of financial institutions pretty significantly too. Does knowledge of the banking infrastructure help do that?
Absolutely. Capital, the amount of capital focusing on insurance risk, it's viewed like any other class. And so, we've been fortunate to work with great insurance and reinsurance partners, but, there's a number of hedge funds and others who, are really starting to think about putting more capital into the cyberspace. As we think about innovating new products, having a knowledge of who has an interest in that space, I think will be helpful. But, with that said, it's a highly regulated industry. There is a reason for insurance companies to have a fear of the unknown. That's something that's served them well for the past several hundred years. And Argo's been a fantastically progressive partner. And it's the juxtaposition is funny because when we launched this with Swiss Re, their CEO had literally made the statement to the Financial Times that cyber risk was uninsurable. And here they are backing us. So, I'd like to say that obviously any time that there is uncertainty or unknown, that's associated with fear. But there's a great opportunity for those who can see through it and have a very defined thesis as to how to go about quantifying risk.
I want to harp on that Swiss Re comment for just a second, because obviously there are two schools of thought. It's the Warren Buffett thinking that says the industry doesn't quite understand the risk, and Evan Greenberg at Chubb, who believes it is insurable. Where are you in this whole spectrum, and who's closer to being right?
Well, I guess I can't side Warren Buffett if we're in the business. By the way, I think he is too. Look, I think that if fear is our friend, I wish business owners would come to us and say, hey, we appreciate the value that we're providing. But that's the business that we're in. Right now, I think it's really hard to quantify that risk for many different reasons. If you look at, pick 10 insurance companies and look at their cyber policy form, I bet you every single one of them is different. So as an industry, we sort of need to come together and figure out what this ought to look like. And part of the reason for that is I think you're going to see more systemic risk or more aggregation of risk. And I think one of the biggest challenges we have in pricing right now is really understanding just how much aggregation there is. If you go back to my comment earlier about property catastrophe insurance, well, you can get a map out and figure it out because a hurricane is only going to be so big, or at least today. I appreciate with global warming, maybe they'll be bigger later. But with the cyber attack, depending upon how clever, a cyber actor is, I mean, you could in theory knock out different parts of different businesses in different parts of the country all at the same time, either on purpose or accidentally. And so that's why we're all trying to really think about, how do you get your hands around this? And of course, the larger the account, the more challenging that becomes.
So we've talked a bit about pricing, uncertainty, fear, but what do the claims coming in? You mentioned Target, you mentioned tons of payouts already happening. The claims coming in, what are they telling us about the nature of cyber risk and how far along we are in doing the
so
job training?
I can certainly give the perspective for small and medium businesses, and claims haven't been terribly surprising. Like that sort of is the news, right? Like for us, over 70%, the root cause for over 70% of the claims we have is email, some failure involving email. That's the entry point into the corporate network, right? Someone is social engineered, someone is phished, and if you know anything about cybersecurity, like none of this is surprising, but no one wants to talk about it because the solution doesn't involve blockchain or artificial intelligence or
no, it's back to hygiene.
Exactly, very basic things, right? I literally estimate that if our customers had turned on two-factor authentication, we'd have half the number of claims. Like that's staggering. So claims really becomes, how do we get customers to do these things? How do we use insurance as an incentive mechanism, ideally through the carrot, but the stick when necessary to do this? And that's how Coalition is structured. I mean, again, we're probably one of the few providers of insurance where we will have technical things you need to fix contingent upon in order to place the coverage with us. We hate Microsoft Remote Desktop. If you use that in your company, please turn it off because you're going to be hacked. And oftentimes we'll release a quote saying, if you turn this off, then your terms are valid. So trying to create those mechanisms, trying to get companies to take the hygiene. And it's not even that they don't want to do this. It's that they just don't know. Because cybersecurity is expensive, it's complex. And I think a big part of us is, selling insurance is the driver of both of our businesses, which frees us from that, I should use the term liberates us, I like that more, from the technology business model of having to sell the software we write. We give the software we write away for free, right? All of our customers have access to these tools for free, and it's actually in our interest. It's not that I'm Mother Teresa or anyone in our company is. If we can lower the loss ratio and we can make Mark, more profitable, like it's a win-win-win for everyone.
Mark, is the claims process saying anything to you in particular about what kinds of claims you're seeing?
Well, I don't know the exact dollar amounts in our cyber business, but the two things that I'm always hearing about are again, identity theft and the remediation of cleaning up the business first, but then going out and literally one customer at a time fixing their identity. And so we've got an army of people working on that. And then, sorry, I'm having a senior moment, but getting held up.
The ransomware.
Yeah,
I
the
think you were
ransomware.
mentioning, yeah.
So, and we've actually paid out some ransomware in cryptocurrency. So, so I guess we're a full service insurance company now. We pay in crypto.
We'll save the crypto
Yeah,
conversation
okay.
for 2 minutes because I do want to get to
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
What's the strangest claim you've seen?
For me, the strangest claims are always the ones that don't seem to involve technology at all, but yet they're covered under a cyber insurance policy. And the amount of things that are covered by cyber insurance are enormous, right? So, we had an architect who someone broke into his office and stole computers. Well, that's a data breach. They weren't encrypted. We did a health employee who left a patient record on top of their car and just drove off. Like, that's a data breach and is covered under cyber insurance. So those are some of the more remarkable ones. There's some that I'm very interested to see. So, working with Argo and Swiss Re, we're I think the only market or one of the few markets that's offering coverage for bodily harm, pollution, and property damage as the result of a cybersecurity failure, right? So take a manufacturing firm, an energy firm that has an industrial control system.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that can be catastrophic, and we're providing affirmative coverage for those. We have not yet seen a claim, but I think that is the frontier, right? The bridge between the physical world and the cyber world. I think it's not very well understood.
Yeah, my guess is that's where cybercrime goes next. I hope we don't have any cyber criminals listening to the two of us to encourage them. But if I'm embarrassed to say that the most innovative thing that the insurance industry's done about cyber is figure out about 5 years ago that actually if you bought a general liability policy from any of us, that it was all covered. And because the way the general liability policy form works is it's all included, it's all covered unless something's specifically excluded. By the way, I'm generalizing to just make a point. So the most innovative thing we've done is figure out how to exclude it and then let you buy it back in a different form, either from Josh, ourselves, or somebody else.
Yeah.
So we have a long way to go. But like go back to the Target thing that I mentioned earlier, just as a different way. So Target didn't get hacked or breached. It was a vendor that they were working with that was too connected to Target's own data system, and so the hacker figured out that if they could go to this vendor, they could then get into Target and get into all their client data.
So that's a good segue into cryptocurrency, actually, too. I mean, should everybody assume that they'll be getting what they need in that universe? And also, let's not ignore, you also invested in BitPay. And how does that giving you a vantage point into the crypto universe and how you're going to handle the question?
Well, I think a lot of people think of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency as just, part of another part of the dark web or, criminal activity, and it's not. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody that's on BitPay is a legitimate business. It is a legitimate asset class to invest in, and so it's a currency that well, maybe it'll be a while before it works like the dollar or the euro, but it's an easy way once you're in it to move it around. And by the way, sometimes you want your transactions to be confidential for all the right reasons, and there's no better way to do it than with a cryptocurrency.
So how, in terms of infrastructure, how does this work? If somebody needs to be paid for ransom in Bitcoin, how do you handle that situation?
Well, every claim is a little different. Much of that is confidential, but you just go, the simple answer is you go buy Bitcoin and then you send it where they tell you to.
Are you holding Bitcoin on your balance sheet for that reason?
No, it's too easy to go buy.
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of volatility in that, though, by the way.
Right. But would you?
Oh,
Would
yeah.
you, as an investor, invest in Bitcoin?
Well, there's a little bit of volatility in that right now. We should have bought Bitcoin when it was like $300.
Right.
It's now, I think, like $700, $800. It was, what, $20,000 last year, so.
So with the last remaining 2 seconds of our conversation, really, I think worth asking you guys to lay the landscape just a little bit for everybody in terms of what kinds of clients are coming to you most often. I mean, are there industries that are hotspots in the next year?
I mean, for us, it's all companies and all industries. Shooting ranges, yacht clubs, restaurants. I think I had to put together a slide for our board of our customers, and it was sort of a struggle of who to put together. And I determined that my favorite, and this may say something horrible about me, is like the company Poopery, that that's one of our clients. It's like, this is amazing. So we literally have clients in every sector.
Yeah,
except for the restricted ones, of course.
Yeah, you had me at rifle range, but
Yeah, there we go.
look, if a business has an email address, I mean, if they've got an email account, they're exposed. I mean, there's also many other ways they're exposed. I think the challenge right now for our company, Argo, is for the really big companies that are a target every minute of every day. Once they get breached, I mean, it's hundreds of millions of dollars in exposure, and that's pretty hard to quantify and get your head around.
Thank you both so much for the conversation, and we should talk to you all again soon.
Yeah, thank you.